Lazy Malays. Malays will be extinct. Chinese refuse to be assimilated. Chinese are ungrateful. With all these racially charged remarks, who are they associated with? That's right, it's former Prime Minister Dr. Mahathir Mohamad. Mahathir recently brought up the assimilation theory in an interview with the Indian TV station, criticizing Malaysian Indians for not being willing to abandon the customs of their ancestral country, implying that they are not loyal to the country. Mahathir was then summoned by the police for these remarks, but he quickly came up with a new controversial statement, the extinction theory, saying that if the Malays do not unite, they will be extinct within the next 10 years. Mahathir's remarks have touched the sensitivities of ethnic groups, with political opponents questioning whether he is using racial remarks to divert attention from his son's investigation by the MACC. As one of the world's most seasoned politicians, does Mahathir have political motives every time he makes racial remarks? Let's take a look back at what Mahathir has said over the past half-century and what tricks are behind them. It is worth noting that Mahathir's racial remarks are not only targeted at non-Malays, but also at the Malays themselves. After the May 13th incident in 1969, Mahathir openly criticized Malaysia's founding father and the then Prime Minister Tunku Abdul Rahman for allowing the dominance of the Chinese in the economy, which he argued resulted in Malays not being able to enjoy the fruits of national development. As a result, Mahathir was expelled from UMNO by Tunku. However, Mahathir didn't sit idle. He quickly published the Malay Dilemma, taking aim at the economic dominance of Chinese businesses and arguing that Malays needed lifelong crutches. He suggested that without support, Malays would struggle to compete with other ethnicities. Following the May 13th incident, Malay nationalism surged. In 1970, Tunku Abdul Rahman stepped down, allowing Mahathir to return to UMNO. He later became Prime Minister in 1981, beginning to shape himself as the protector of the Malays. Mahathir's strategy was to simultaneously criticize the Malays as inherently lazy and lacking in a diligent work ethic while introducing various policies aimed at assisting Malays and advocating protectionism. This approach of criticizing while providing incentives to the Malays became a hallmark of his political career. In 1987, the Chinese community protested against the Ministry of Education's appointment of non-Chinese speaking teachers to administrative positions in vernacular schools. The Mahathir government responded by arresting 107 leaders from various political parties and Chinese educationist groups and ordering the closure of 3 newspapers. The crackdown heightened tensions, marking it as one of the darkest periods in Malaysian democracy, known as the Ops Lalang. In 1991, Mahathir introduced Vision 2020, which included the concept of Banga Malaysia, aiming to create a unified national identity that embraces all ethnicities in a diverse multiracial country. This idea was once seen as him relinquishing his previous Malay supremacist stance. After the landslide victory of the Barisan Nasional in the 1995 general elections, he once again promoted the idea of Bangsa Malaysia. In an interview with Time magazine the following year, Mahathir even stated that the idea that a person needs to be 100% Malay to be a Malaysian is no longer accepted. His administration accepts Malaysia as a multiracial country and will focus on building bridges. He also stressed that his administration does not intend to force the non-Malays to change their religions. However, Mahathir's subsequent efforts for ethnic unity and education policies continued to stir controversy. When he sought to implement teaching math and science in English and faced opposition from the Chinese education group Dongzhong, he labeled them as extremists. Similarly, his plan for Sekolah Wawasan, which purported to unite children of all ethnicities, faced obstruction, resulting in the plan's failure. In 2003, after ruling for 22 years, Mahathir finally stepped down. However, he never ceased to criticize his successors, Abdullah and Najib. Concurrently, Mahathir continued to stoke racial sentiments, attempting to maintain his political influence. In 2010, Mahathir repeatedly criticized then Prime Minister Najib's Satu Malaysia concept as vague. He continued to promote assimilation policies, arguing that the non-Malays must leave behind their ethnic backgrounds and speak only one language to achieve the true meaning of Satu Malaysia. Following the significant losses by the Barisan Nasional, particularly MCA, in the 2013 general elections, Mahathir subsequently laid the blame on ungrateful Chinese, suggesting that despite Najib's efforts to court Chinese voters by allocating funds for Chinese education, they showed no gratitude and instead voted for the opposition. As of 2014, Mahathir continued to persist with his theory of Malay laziness. In an interview with Utusan Malaysia, he stated that his stepping down originally wasn't due to a failure to change the Malay mindset, but rather because he held the position of Prime Minister for too long. If he could, he claimed, he would still work to change the Malay mindset. Critics widely believed that Mahathir, starting with his book, The Malay Dilemma, habitually exploited racial issues to provoke anxiety among Malays. His early discourse may have been packaged with a sense of frustration, aiming to remind Malays of their dependence on the government for survival and to consolidate political support among Malays. However, over the decades, the new economic policy, continued by Mahathir's administration, has created the rich and elite who are closely intertwined with the ruling party, benefiting only a select few cronies. In 2018, Malaysia experienced its first ever change in government through democratic elections. Did Malaysia change for the better then? Even with Mahathir back as Prime Minister, he still didn't change significantly. During an interview with Malaysia KINI, he reiterated the discourse of Malay laziness, suggesting that Malays were unable to compete with the Chinese. In 2019, amidst controversy, Mahathir defended his statement at the Congress Maruah Melayu. When Pakatan Harapan first came to power, UMNO and PAS rallied under the banner of Muafakat Nasional, but the subsequent Sheraton move led to the collapse of the Pakatan Harapan government. Following the loss of power, Mahathir and Pakatan Harapan drifted apart, with Mahathir's racial discourse becoming even more pronounced. Whether speaking to the Asian Times or Malaysia KINI, Mahathir often spoke about the wealth of the Chinese, leading to wealth inequality, and criticized vernacular schools for causing national division. Mahathir also introduced the chopstick theory, questioning the Chinese reluctance to abandon traditional dining practices, including the use of chopsticks, and their unwillingness to let go of their ethnic identity. Despite his occasional racial remarks, Mahathir's efforts did not rescue him politically. In the 15 general elections, the coalition led by Mahathir, the Gerakan Tanah Air, GTA, suffered a devastating defeat. Mahathir himself lost his seat in Langkawi. Did Mahathir change his stance and embrace multiculturalism after his defeat? Apparently no, and Mahathir is still Mahathir. And now, without the backing of Pejuang or GTA, he instead advocated for the Malay Proclamation, intensifying fears of Malay isolation. Mahathir even alleged there was an attempt by outsiders to shift Malaysia from being a Tanah Melayu into a multiracial country. At this juncture, past President Hadi Awang supported Mahathir's Malay Proclamation, while Mahathir campaigned for the Perikatan Nasional, aiming to attract Malay votes. Despite being summoned by the police 9 times for his remarks on 3R issues, Mahathir vowed not to stay silent and even accused Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim of being a dictator. After discussing many of Mahathir's classic quotes, people's initial reaction might be to scoff and see him as nothing more than a repeat offender of racism. However, upon examining these discourses, we can draw a simple conclusion. Mahathir's endorsement of racism has never changed, and in recent years, his extreme rhetoric has only intensified in his pursuit of political power. Analysts suggest that Mahathir's continual criticism of the Malays as lazy and accusing other ethnic groups of being outsiders is merely to deepen the racial divide between the Malays and non-Malays. This action is taken consistently to gain political benefits while ignoring the reality of Malaysia as a multiracial country. Mahathir's accusation of Indian communities lacking loyalty to the nation with his assimilation theory in January of this year prompted a sarcastic response from Anwar.
Dia memang terkenal, Melayu bagi dia malas, melainkan dia India dan China itu dianggap kurang loyal, melainkan beberapa kroni dia. Saya ingat kenyataan itu kita bantah keras, sangat tidak bertanggungjawab. Bagi saya, semua rakyat yang loyal kita harus hormati, tak kira siapa mana kau.
Times have changed, and Mahathir's racial discourse is nowhere near as influential as it was 50 years ago. The Malays are now numb to his threats, and the non-Malays no longer see him as a hero of the nation. This is evident in his catastrophic defeat in the 15th general election. However, it's worth pondering that although the same rhetoric from Mahathir has lost its appeal, the conservative leaders of the Perikatan Nasional continue to manipulate extreme rhetoric, exploiting racial and religious sentiments for political gain. They still managed to garner support among Malays, as seen in the 15th general election and last year's state elections, riding on the green wave. This indicates that narrow-minded racism still finds an audience. Today, Bersatu and PAS have almost replaced UMNO's former role as defenders of racial and religious supremacy. With Mahathir finding his place within the Perikatan Nasional, it would be a big challenge for the unity government to resist the resurgence of racial extremism. If you enjoyed this report, remember to like and share it. And don't forget to subscribe to Malaysia KINI and Kinitv. We'll continue to analyze hot topics in the country, and we welcome you to scan the QR code on the screen to encourage us to produce more great content.